I'm here with my friend Marza today. Marza and I know each other through Instagram. We both love Instagram and have a lot of friends and fans and followers there. So we thought it would be really fun to get together and do a little Q&A session and answer some questions. So I'll let Marza tell you a little bit about herself and how she came to being a cellist.
So I actually started playing cello at the age of 5. My older brother, played Suzuki violin, so I would sit in on his lessons. And my mom was gonna have me start on some instrument, and I ultimately decided on cello because sometimes hearing a person practicing violin at a very young age in a lesson is not the most beautiful thing to hear. Not that there's anything against violin, but I was just drawn to the sounds of the cello that was across the hallway. And then I just grew up loving music. None of my family pursued it professionally, and I kind of just had this passion that pushed me into wanting to apply for schools. I finished my undergrad at the New England Conservatory, and then I broke my hand in my senior year, and I was going to start as a master's student, but plans kind of had to be put on hold. NEC accepted me into their master's program, but I ended up actually switching to a graduate diploma so that I would have more time to practice and be able to involve myself in other things that I wanted to do within the musical community, like chamber music, orchestra, and really have a chance to dedicate it rather than just spend my time practicing. So I finished my graduate diploma, and then in the fall I'm moving to New York and I'm going to Juilliard to do a master's.
And she's living the dream, going to Juilliard.
Living the dream.
Our first question is, what advice or tips do you have for cellists who are just starting out? I would say my biggest tip is to be patient, because the cello, unfortunately, is not as friendly of an instrument to start playing on as, maybe the guitar, the piano, other instruments that you can sound good in a short amount of time. The cello has a lot of technique, so it takes a long time to really even sound halfway decent. It could take a few years, and it's normal to sound scratchy and out of tune a little bit in the beginning. And I think you just have to be patient with yourself and commit the time to practicing and working hard on your technique, because it will pay off in the long run.
Yeah, and if I can just kind of spin off of that, along with being patient, is when you're sitting at the cello, really appreciating the sound that comes out of a cello. I mean, we all love Bach's G major prelude, and everyone wants to play it and everyone wants to play Dvorak, but at the end of the day, you have this wonderful tool of expression that has the most beautiful sound. I mean, people say they love the cello because it's the instrument closest to the human voice in tone and range. So if you're ever feeling discouraged when you're practicing or you're playing, just take a second and really hear the sounds of an open string, or if you're working on intonation, just take a deep breath, take your time, find the resonance and the great ring that this instrument gives you, and I'm sure you'll be inspired by this natural beauty that just comes out of the instrument.
Mm-hmm. Next question. What advice do you have for helping people decide if they want to have a career in music, and how did you choose?
The way I chose music was that there was nothing else in the world that I loved to do more than music. Of course, I had hobbies such as I did classical fencing for a little while, and my mom put me in acting classes and dancing classes, which I was terrible at all of those. But at the end of the day, I enjoyed music. I sang in a choir for a little bit. I mean, I wasn't very good, but I loved the sound of it. But even though I did a bunch of these different types of art forms, nothing really spoke to me the same way as going home and practicing the cello. I was practicing in a really smart manner because my mother would practice with me when I was really young, and of course I learned how to do that. And then I think the time that you realize what you want to do for your career, for me it was when you realize that you can do what you love every single day and you can be happy, and that's how you're going to make your living. Why would you choose anything else, So that's kind of how I figured out that I wanted to do music as a profession.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the love of it is always something that draws people to being a musician. For me, I was always about self-expression. I was drawing pictures from a young age. I loved art. I started playing guitar and also piano when I was younger, just all as a way to express myself. And even though I came to cello later in life, when I was in high school and getting more serious, cello really became my new voice for expressing myself. And there was no question to me that the cello was the way that I wanted to speak to the world, and classical music was the medium that I wanted to express how I felt. So to me, there was no question, and I was lucky enough to have supportive parents who wanted me to follow whatever it was that I liked. So that's what drew me to being a cellist. So I think if you're considering that, obviously you want to have the love and the passion there. I mean, that's true for both of us, and I think for anyone you ask that's a musician, you want to love it so much that it really feels like it's worth working for, because being a musician is not always the easiest career, and it's definitely not the simplest, but if you really love what you do and you're willing to put the work in, it is worth it. So just go into it knowing that there will be some challenges, but that your love is strong enough to override those challenges.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times people think to themselves, oh, being a musician is so easy. You can play at a wedding and get paid so much money and all this stuff. And it's really not true. You kind of see the glamorous side of us being musicians, whether it be on Instagram or in videos. But I have a lot of students that are people who are doctors or are in a different profession, and they come to music and they love it and they have such a joy when they practice and they play, but there's no feeling of worry or anything like that, which sometimes I get when I play or when I perform or when I practice or try to figure out my life. So it's never too late, one, if you're playing another or doing another profession and you want to play the cello or any instrument, but also if you have passions that aren't just music and you maybe are considering that, don't be afraid to explore those as well.
Right, I think there's nothing to prove in being a professional musician. You can love music just as much as a professional and still do it as a hobby. So just know that you do have options.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question is, how do you balance practicing, rehearsals, homework, etc., and your outside of music interests? Do you have any tips on staying organized and disciplined between all these commitments? So it's definitely hard, especially if you're in music school, to figure out how you balance everything, because a typical day isn't a 9-to-5 job, and it's not like we even have 4 classes a week. I would have orchestra in the mornings and then classes all through the afternoon, and then I'd have to remember to myself, I haven't even practiced yet today. So then, of course, we want to keep sense of sanity and sense of happiness, which would come from like maybe my outside of music interests. And of course, in high school, I was able to have so many more different non-music hobbies. But one thing that I've really enjoyed doing is just going to a movie, which is not that time consuming if you think about it. So of course, at the end of the day, I would do my practicing as much as I could do that day productively. And then if I was able to, I'd call up a friend and say, let's just go see a movie, anything to just get me away from the practice room. So even though some of my hobbies changed, I'm still able to go out and just kind of separate music, which is a very good thing to do. On the weekends, I kind of give myself more time to do other things. Like I love coloring in those coloring books that you get from Barnes & Noble. They're so much fun. So sometimes I'll watch like silly makeup YouTube videos and just color at the same time. And I'll do that for like an hour. And that kind of, lets my mind just kind of wander or listen to things. That's another thing I love doing is makeup, because I just think it's fun. So you just kind of fit things in, and like even if you have an hour a day, that's your special time, and make sure you put it in there.
Yeah, I think it's so important to take care of yourself mentally and emotionally, especially being a musician, because if you're in school, you're going to be getting a lot of criticism from your teacher and other teachers and maybe even your colleagues and peers. You're going to be getting a lot of criticism from yourself because you're trying to improve. So you really do have to kind of make sure that you're feeling okay and that you're in a happy place, because you're not going to be in a good position to improve things and work hard if you're feeling drained and like really just dried out from everything. So I think for me, I'm out of school now, which is a huge relief, because school is hard. But I do remember those times being in school trying to balance my ensemble commitments and my practice time and my coursework. And I know for me, I had to make my own personal priority list, because you're gonna have people at school telling you what's important, and they may not have your best interests at heart. Schools have their own motives and teachers have their own motives, and you need to have your own motives of what you want to improve and be working on. So I know for me, there were times that maybe my homework didn't get as much attention as it should have because I really needed to practice for a jury. Sometimes you have to make really difficult decisions about what's important, so you want to make sure that the voice in your head is the clearest and not just the ones around you, because then you're going to get confused, you're not going to know what's important, and you're not going to know what to prioritize. So make your own goals for yourself so that you can kind of drown out the noise sometimes of all the demands that are being put on your time.
So the next question we got was, how many hours a day approximately do you practice? So this is a really good question, because it kind of goes along with time management. ideally you would be able to practice as much as you wanted to in a really productive manner, but sometimes if you're in school, that's just not the case that's going to be available to you. So of course my teacher told me, he was like, I think every good cellist should practice 5 hours a day for the next 10 years. And I was like, oh my God, how is that possible when you've got orchestra and chamber music and your classes? So one thing that I do is I try to get in at least 3 to 4 solid hours of really productive practice. Now, of course, during a school day, that's really hard because you might not be able to sit down and do 3 hours. So what I like to do is practice in 30-minute to hour chunks. Of course, it would be ideal if I had 2 hours at a time to practice, but as long as you're just really focusing your mind really well and then getting up and just stretching, even if it's for a minute before you start again, it kind of wheels my practice back, or it brings my practice back into a very productive manner. So even if I don't practice 4 hours that day, if I've done 2 hours of really good focused listening practice, that will be way better than practicing 7 hours of just kind of trying to hit the same shift over and over again, which becomes mindless and you're usually putting in bad habits. So for me, ideally, I'd like to practice 3 to 4 hours a day. Sometimes it's just not possible, but that's okay as long as you make your practicing really effective and really productive to yourself as well. And you'll leave feeling a lot happier also.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think sometimes there's a little bit too much about how much are you practicing, and it just becomes a number game of I practice this many hours. And you do want to set, I know for myself, especially when I was in school preparing for recitals, I tried to set minimums for myself. So I would just be like, I have to get in, if it was a really hard time, like I have to meet 3 hours, like whatever happens, I gotta get 3 hours in, 5 days out of this week. Or maybe it would be 2 hours when I didn't have a deadline approaching of a concert or a recital. So it's good to set those numbers for yourself, but again, the whole thing that Marza talked about, productive practicing, like making sure that you're practicing smart and you're practicing in a way that you're gonna actually really absorb. And that goes again with kind of taking care of yourself. If you're tired and fried and not focused, your practicing is probably not gonna be as effective. And if you're on hour 4 and you're just kind of dragging yourself, you might be better off taking a break than practicing that 4th hour badly. So it's all a balancing act, and I think quality is in line with quantity. You got to balance both of those.
So the next question was, what is a good way to develop muscle memory, as in, hitting a hard shift or coming down from a shift?
Yeah, I would say, so much of what we do in muscle memory comes from repetition. And when you're thinking about repetition and doing something over and over again, I think one of the things I try to stress to my students is be very careful of doing things improperly. As soon as you notice that you're going for a shift in a way that you don't want to go, or you're consistently missing, cut yourself off from that chain immediately, because the more times you repeat a certain kind of mistake, you're that much more likely to be doing that later. So no matter how much you have to slow it down, whatever you have to do to execute what you're trying to do properly, even if it feels like, oh, this isn't fast enough, you have to bring it to wherever you're at to do it properly and correctly, because that's what you want your muscle memory to really hold on to. So repeating things, but being mindful of not repeating bad habits or mistakes.
Yeah, I definitely agree. This summer I was lucky enough to spend some time with Zool Bailey, who's a concert cellist, and he gave me this advice, which was, if you're trying to figure out a fingering, before you've really had a chance to really practice it, find a good fingering. And by that he means, if you think this is going to be a good fingering but you miss it the first time, don't do it. Just don't waste your time trying to practice something that's not going to happen. Find a different way that you're more likely to hit more percentage of the time. Of course, you want it to be 100% of the time. So once you've figured out a really good fingering for that spot, then that's when you have to put in your productive time. Because if you're putting in time on a shift that's just not going to work up to tempo, or that you miss 50% of the time, you're going to miss it in the concert. Like, there's no getting around it. So then once you've figured out your fingering, when you go to practice muscle memory, this is when it gets a little tricky, because you could easily put in bad habits. Like, if you're not paying attention, your arm's going to be in the wrong direction, and then you're practicing it in a way that's not going to work in performance. So for me, along with really conscientious practice, if I'm doing it, I'm not going to do it 5 times without stopping. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do it once. Did I miss it? Was it sharp? Was it flat? Was my hand in a good position? Was it uncomfortable? If any of those things, pop up, that's an immediate warning sign. So, okay, let me now try to find the solution to that. So rather than me doing it 10 times and hitting it maybe 7 out of those 10 times, I'm immediately thinking after the first time, what can I do to improve this? And then if I do it again and it's off again and I miss it, then of course I'll ask the same questions, and I'll do that until I find the right way, and then I pause, analyze how I did that, and then do it again. And that's how I practice muscle memory. So again, going in with those don't put in bad habits. Don't do it 20 times, and if you're making it not even half the time, that's not going to work for you, you know?
Right. Our next question is, what are your warm-up routines? So for me, I'm all about scales. Like, scales are my everything. And I think that, especially, you know, when you play an instrument with no frets and you just need to know that fingerboard as though there are frets, you need to be so comfortable with your fingerboard. Scales are just the best way to really get your hand aware of that. So for me, on a good day, I would like to devote at least 45 minutes of just warming up on scales with various bow patterns. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll look at a piece that I'm playing and I'll say, what are some bowings that I'm gonna have to do in this that are tricky? Maybe it's slurs, maybe it's separated 16th notes, whatever it is, I'll take that basic bowing pattern and then I'll apply it to a couple of scales. So I'll play through my scales, kind of getting my bow woken up to the bow stroke and also getting my left hand in the key that I'm about to play in. And if I'm going to take it even further than that, and I really want to get my left hand aware, I'll sometimes practice thirds and sixths as well, just to get the whole framework of my hand really aware where all my pitches are.
So for me, my warm-up varies every day. It kind of depends how I'm feeling. So what I do always start out with is just a few open strings, just kind of opening up my ear and just hearing resonance on my cello, making sure it's perfectly in tune. And then, of course, I will do, ideally I do scales. I'll be honest, I don't do scales every day. I'm trying to get better about it. It is shameful, it is. But I'm trying to get better about it. And so if there's a day that I really don't want to practice scales, I'll practice scales in thirds, because it's not the same as just doing, okay, I'm going to do my G sharp minor scale again, you know. I'll try to do it in thirds because it's a little more interesting in my mind. I'm like, I'm not really doing scales, but I am. So I'll do thirds or sixths or maybe even octaves if I'm feeling fancy that day. Not always. And then what I do is I'll take a really hard passage from whatever piece I'm working on in depth that day. So say it's the Barber Concerto and you've got those thirds, or you have some hard shifts. What I do is I turn that into an exercise. So I strip away the fact that this is the Barber Concerto. Instead, I'm like, I'm going to use this as my warm-up. Slow, really focused on balance and hand position and sound and resonance, and without any type of rhythm. So I won't play it in the rhythm that the piece is in. I'll just use it as a warm-up. And what that does is, one, it kind of takes away the fright of, oh my god, I'm playing this concerto, and it opens up my ears and I learn new techniques for that. So I'm kind of hitting it in my warm-up and later. So what I actually have a sheet that's on like a piece of cardstock that has, you know, the 2 lines of hard passages of like every major concerto that I should have like kind of in my routine, and I use that just as a warm-up sometimes.
That's great. And the last question for today, what tips do you have for university and orchestral auditions?
Oh man, so I actually don't have a lot of background in orchestral auditions, so I'm not really going to answer that. I can pass on some advice from Yumi Kendall, who's the assistant principal of the Philadelphia Orchestra, and she just said be able to play your excerpts like practically in your sleep. So if you can wake up at 2 a.m. and play them really well, then you're going to have probably a successful audition. But I don't have any actual experience in orchestral auditions, so I'm not going to say anything about it. As for college or graduate school auditions, it's going to be different for everybody. For me, I like to know the pieces ahead of time. So if I'm planning 2 years in advance, say I'm thinking of, you know, doing a master's audition, I'm going to want to know the music before. So I'm not going to want to be learning that fall all the music that I need to prepare for my pre-screening auditions. I'm going to already have known them. You know, in my mind, I'll have it mentally memorized and I'll be able to play it already. But then I'll really fine tune, you know, starting in the fall or even in the summer, usually in the summer. And then all that time afterwards is fine tuning, so that by the time you come for your audition, it's like playing a piece in your sleep. It'll be like second nature to you. Another thing is keep up the excitement, and by that I mean don't just practice your audition repertoire every day. Bring in something you like to play, whether it's going to be something you practice or not, or just like bring a piece of music out and just read it for fun. If you're just practicing the same stuff every day, you're gonna be miserable and you're gonna be bored.
Yeah, definitely. You have to kind of take care of yourself again, because auditions are so stressful. Like, we're always so horrified, we're working so hard. So I think it's important to be balancing your hard work with also taking care of your mind, which we kind of talked about earlier in the video. I also think, just pretty much all Marza's points, you don't want to be going into an audition with anything feeling a little uncertain. The earlier that you can start on anything, the better off you are, because you have to take into account that you are going to be more scared and more nervous than you could ever imagine being during your practice sessions. So you want to be in a situation where no matter how much pressure is on you and how scared you are, you can still play. And another good way to get ready for that is practice being nervous. So practice performing for other people. Grab your family members, your friends. If you know people who are musicians also, that's great too, because they can give you feedback. But have little mock auditions or mock performances, whatever it is, so that you feel when you walk into an audition, it's not the first time that you're having to play this music for people. You've already done it, you have some confidence in yourself. But really, it's just being focused and working hard, and it gets easier with time. I think anybody who's done any kind of audition, the more auditions you do, the more you come to understand, the challenges and how hard it can be, and it just gets easier. Everything takes time.
You mentioned playing for people and performing and really doing a mock audition. I think something that goes along with that is when you choose to do that for these people, or even for yourself, practice that in your performance clothes, because maybe you're not used to it. Maybe you go into your audition and you're like, this doesn't feel quite right. You'll have already tried it out, and also you get more mentally in the performance. You're like, okay, this is it. I'm in my concert shoes, I'm in my outfit, like this is really real, so that when you do go into that same setting, it won't feel as scary. And then another thing is, when you go in for your auditions, you're going to hear tons of cellists that sound great, but you have to remember, you're great too. That's why you're there, so don't be shaken by all these other cellists that maybe are playing really flashy things in the door next door to you to maybe psych you out. Just focus on yourself, focus on making beautiful music and beautiful sound, because ultimately that's what you're there to do. And if you don't get in, but you're happy that you put forward a beautiful performance with great tone and you're satisfied, that's what matters, and it doesn't matter what school you get into.
Definitely. Thanks so much for sending us your questions. We had a great time answering them. If you have anything that you want to add, be sure to leave those in the comments. We'd love to talk about this stuff even more with you guys. I'm considering doing more Q&A videos on my channel, so if you have more questions or things you'd like to hear, be talked about, be sure to comment with that as well. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel and check out some of my other videos. And if you'd like to help support the production of these videos, you can become my patron on Patreon.
And give her a big thumbs up.
And go follow Marza.
And Emily. And follow us both on Instagram.
Follow both of us.
That was weird.